Following on from the release of the GX12 and the Nomad, Radiomaster have now released a new range of receivers that are all based on the LR1121 chipset. These new receivers are the XR series, and not only do they offer some of the great functionality that we've seen on this radio modules, such as dual band capable receivers and Gemini X capable receivers, they are also priced extremely competitive as well, with a receiver as little as $10 and a Gemini X receiver as little as $20. Now, alongside talking about these receivers today, I'm also going to try and explain to you the differences between what this new chipset offers compared to what we've had in the past, but also make sure that you understand the compatibility differences as well, because whilst you can use these new radios and receivers with older XpressLRS radio and receivers, there are some modes that are not available if you do. Now, I am, alongside that, going to release a separate dedicated video going into a lot more detail on those differences, and once that's released, I will put a link to that down below as well. That could be one that's worth a look, because there is a bit of confusion around what the new chipset offers compared to the old ones. Now, just before we get into this one, I do need to just be clear and say Radiomaster did send me these receivers, this radio, and this module to review. They have not paid me to make this video. They have not seen this video before it's been published, and as always, my thoughts are entirely my own. Although I do just want to add, I may use affiliate links from Radiomaster in this video. Radiomaster are one of the only brands that I do use affiliate links from, but that hasn't swayed anything to do with my thoughts. But I do, as always, want to be crystal clear before we get into it. Anyway, let's get on and take a look at these receivers first of all. Then we'll talk about the compatibility. Then we'll talk about price. Okay, so there are 4 new receivers coming from Radiomaster, all based on the LR1121 chipset. Now, I only actually have 3 of them here today. There is an XR1, an XR2, an XR3, which I don't have, and then an XR4. Now, one thing to understand about all of these receivers is they're all based on the same chipset, but there are differences in the RF behavior. Some are dual band, some are single band. You have your first 3 receivers, which are non-Gemini capable. And what I mean by that is they don't have dual chipsets, which means you can't use the Gemini X functionality. The XR4, though, does have the dual chipsets and fully supports the Gemini X functionality. And that's the one we'll take a look at a little bit more later on. Now, when it comes to the first 3 receivers, the XR1 is a standard receiver designed for either 2.4 gigs or 868-900 and has an external antenna. There is the XR2, has an internal antenna, and then you've got the XR3, which has 2 antennas, which we'll talk about in a minute. So to start, we'll look at the XR1. Now, this kit I've got here is the XR1DB. Now, this is the dual band kit. When you buy this receiver, you will actually have the option of buying it in 3 different configurations. The receiver in those configurations will be the same, but the antenna included will be different. So, for instance, the XR1 is capable of dual band, as I've said already, both either 2.4 gigs or 868-900. It has an external antenna connection, and in the kit I've got here, it comes with a dual band antenna, which means you can simply switch between the 868-900 on the fly. There are, though, other kits of this receiver available. You will be able to buy it with either just a 2.4 gigs antenna or just a 900 megs antenna as well. The receiver will be the same in all of those packages. It is just the antenna choice that's different. So if you're someone that's only flying with 2.4 gigs, you can buy it with the smaller 2.4 gigs antenna and not worry about the dual band capability. Now, those antennas will be available as separate and extras as well. And what's nice is if you were to buy this 2.4 gig version only, but you wanted to upgrade it to 900 later, you could go and buy a 900 megs antenna, or if you wanted to upgrade it to the dual band antenna, you absolutely could. There is no restriction here on the receiver. The restriction is simply on the antenna choice. Now, with regards to the specification of the XR1, as I've said already, it features the LR1121 chipset, an ESP32, and has a single antenna output. It has up to 100 milliwatts of telemetry power, and it supports the maximum packet rates of DK500 or K1000. Now, it has an input voltage range of 5 volt, pretty much like any other receiver, and the dimensions are 20 millimeters by 13 millimeters by 3 millimeters. Now, as you can see, it is pretty much the same as we see from any other XpressLRS receiver. We've got our pads down the bottom there. We've got our negative, plus 5 volts, TX and RX. There is then some additional little pads on the side there for an additional UART. And then on this side here, we've got our button, which allows us to do our flashing as well as maybe even binding. Now, just having a look under the microscope on this side here, you can see our ESP32. You've now got a nice view of the pads, nice and castellated, and you can also see that TX2 and RX2 pads up there for the second UART. Now, with regards to the Wi-Fi on this ESP32, it is still there, and you can see there's a little PCB track down there for the antenna. You can see a little filter there heading off into the main chipset. Now, the big change, though, is on this side here. You can see that new LR1121 chipset. We can see our RF filter, our Skyworks power amplifier for that 100 watts of telemetry power, and that then heading out to our single antenna connector. Overall, it does look very similar to a standard XpressLRS receiver, but you've now got that new chipset installed. Now, alongside the receiver in the package, you will get a small wire pack, which they always include, as well as a couple of pieces of heat shrink tubing as well. And this is going to be pretty much the standard receiver that most people will choose. It isn't the smallest in the world. It's not quite as small as the likes of the old EP1s, but it's certainly not the largest. And I think this is probably going to be a very good go-to receiver for most people. Next, moving over to the XR2. Now, this is designed to be the smallest option with regards to the receivers. Again, like the XR1, it's based on the LR1121 chipset. However, the difference here is this receiver has a built-in antenna. Now, this one is only designed to be used on the frequency that you buy it on, which is 2.4 gigs. This one is not capable of 900 megs because it has that built-in tower antenna. Now, this is the smaller receiver of the batch. Let me just zoom in. Size-wise, it comes in at 16mm by 12mm by 6mm. It weighs just 0.7 of a gram, and it supports a maximum telemetry power of 10 milliwatts and has that small built-in tower 2.4 gigs antenna. It is based on that same LR1121 chipset, as I've said, but you're restricted on the frequency band of this one because there aren't any tower antennas available as far as I know for the 868-900 megs band. So as a result of this, this is designed to be your small standard receiver. It's just based on the new chipset. Okay, looking at the XR2, now you can see again that LR1121 chipset, but what you will notice on this one is that there's no power amplifier, there's no additional output with telemetry power. You can see that little 2.4 gigs tower antenna there. Unfortunately, this is the one that can only do 2.4 gigs because there really are no small 2.4 gigs antennas available. This is really designed as a replacement for the likes of your EP1 and others. Now, on the inputs, again, you can see your castellated pads for our main inputs, and again, you've still got that RX and TX2, that second UART available on this one. And then if I flip it over to the other side, ESP32, and then we've got our Wi-Fi antenna located down there. Now, alongside the XR1 and XR2, there is also an XR3 coming. That is a dual antenna diversity receiver. It is antenna diversity, not receiver diversity. Again, it supports, like the XR1, 2.4 gigs and 8 68900s. It just has 2 antennas. So basically, it's an antenna diversity version of the XR1. It supports up to 100 milliwatts of RF power. Again, you will be able to choose a version depending on the antenna type, 2.4 gigs antennas, 900 megs antennas, or dual band antennas. And basically, it's a diversity version of the XR1. Now, the final one to look at is this, the XR4. Now, this is a true diversity dual band Gemini X capable receiver. This is a new smaller version. As you can see here, it is a lot smaller than that last one. We have a unit here that has our ESP32 there. We have our 2 LR1121 chipsets and then our 2 power amplifiers. Now, this receiver basically supports everything. So it is true diversity dual band. Each output can do either the same band, 2.4 gigs on each, 900 megs on each, or one on 2.4, one on 900. And as a result of that, it fully supports the Gemini X capability. So it's giving you that full functionality of that Nomad or GX12 radio. Now, as you can see, it is so much smaller than the DBR4 that came before it. This, again, still has the dual LR1121s, dual power amplifiers, same 100 milliwatts of telemetry power. It supports your standard UART input, but it does have the additional UART pads down there on the side as well. That's a really nice touch if you want to connect in external devices. And again, it's in a much smaller package than we've seen before, and it offers all of that great functionality of those new chipsets, including that full Gemini X capability. Now, on this side of the board, again, we have our ESP32, slightly different chipset on this one compared to the others as a result of it having that additional functionality. You can see up here, it has our antenna for the Wi-Fi, a PCB track antenna again. And then down here, we have our input pads, our castellated pads, but we now have those proper pads on the corner for that second UART, RX2 and TX2. You can see them located there. They're going to be a bit easier to solder to compared to the others. Then if we flip it over to this side, this is obviously the model with the dual LR1121 chipsets. So if I just rotate it there, you can see them. That's going to give us that Gemini X capability. We've then got our dual outputs independent, our dual power amplifiers heading out to our dual antennas. The XR4 isn't a diversity only receiver. It is a full Gemini X receiver. The only real difference between this one and that original one which I showed you before is the fact that it doesn't have the separate antennas. Each antenna is going to be capable of either 2.4, 8, 6, 8, 900, so you're going to need to use those dual band antennas on board. Now, just comparing that XR4 to that DBR4 that released a little while ago, this is the all-out top-end dual band receiver. It has independent antennas for each of the bands. So as it, like this, uses the dual LR1121 chipsets, but it has its own 2.4 gigs antenna and its own 900 megs antenna on each chipset. So there are 4 independent antennas on this one compared to this that uses a single antenna port for each chipset, and then you would require a dual band antenna. Now, the overall specifications of these two are very similar. Both can do up to 100 milliwatts of telemetry output. Really, the new XR4 is going to suit 95% of people out there. The DBR4 is going to be if you want the absolute optimized setup. But what's nice here is Radiomaster are now giving us options across the board. If we just look at the entire product stack, apart from that XR3 that I don't have, you can see we've got our standard now XR1 dual band capable, just down to the choice of your antenna, but no Gemini X. You've got the XR2 limited to 2.4 gigs, but again, is capable of being used with all of the new modes as well. You've got the XR3, which I don't have here. That is a dual antenna diversity version of the XR1. It looks similar to this, but without the dual chipsets. And then obviously we've got the XR4 and that DBR4. Radiomaster have got a complete range of receivers now that are all based on the new Semtech chipset, and as a result of that, it means you've got all of the options you need. It's really great to see this move forward. Really, for me, this new XR1 is probably going to be the standard receiver I use. As I mentioned earlier, it's not quite as small as the likes of the EP1s and the EP2s, but it's fine for most people, and it just gives so many additional benefits. Now, as I said at the start, I am going to put out a dedicated video explaining the bigger differences between these chipsets in a lot more detail. However, I am going to cover it here as well, but I will put a link to that video below. Now, the basics are, the big benefit of these new chipsets is the fact that the LR1121 supports dual band. On the older XpressLRS hardware, you had to choose the RF chipset based on the band you were going to use. So for instance, on this Boxer that has 2.4 gigs, it's going to use the SX1280 or the SX1281, and on the 868-900 side, it would generally use the SX1276. Your receiver and transmitter was limited to the band that it was designed to be used on as a result of those chipsets, and it was a hardware change, which meant you either had to put a module in the back or you had to stay with the band you were on. The big benefit of the LR1121 is that it is seamlessly able to switch between low band and high band without any hardware change. This does bring some additional complexity because you have to set up the RF front end to be able to work on both bands, and if you want to be able to switch between, you need to use a dual band antenna as well. But the big benefit is each chipset allows both, and this now means that you have the choice of the band you want to use. You can make one receiver that will work on 868 or 900, and you either choose an antenna that best suits the band, or you put a dual band antenna on it and you're ready to go. Now, whilst there are some upsides to this chipset, there is also a little bit of a downside, or at least a change as well, and that change is, whilst the new chipset supports the LoRa modes just like the older chipset, unfortunately the new chipset doesn't support FLRC. Now, FLRC is a modulation type that offers generally very low latency, and this was used in the very fast modes in XpressLRS, modes such as the F1000 modes on 2.4 gigs that allowed you to get that ultra low latency link. The LoRa modes are still fully compatible on this new chipset, but what this means is receivers and radios that use the LR1121 cannot use any mode in XpressLRS that used to be based off FLRC. Whilst you can't have FLRC though, you can have FSK on these new chipsets, and XpressLRS are still working on new modes, and whilst we don't have the ultra low latency modes today in this new system on 2.4 gigs, they are developing new modes, and hopefully we will see a return of the very fast modes in the future. You still have D500 available with FSK called DKF500, however you don't have the 1000 modes available yet. Now, there is a lot more that I could say around FSK versus FLRC, but the basics are there is a bit of a line in the sand as a result of this hardware change. That change isn't something that could be fixed in software in the future. The LR1121 simply cannot do FLRC, and as a result of that, you are always going to have this bit of a line in the sand. Now, just touching a bit more on that compatibility, as you can see on this chart here, the XR1, the XR3 and XR4 all support dual band. The XR4 is the only one that supports the dual band Gemini X function. The XR2 is 2.4 gigs only, as I've already said. Now, with regards to then compatibility on the XpressLRS system, you can see here the Nomad is listed in the middle, and this is anything based on the new LR1121 chipset. So it's not just the Nomad module, it is the GX12 and it is these new receivers. So you can see there is compatibility on certain modes back and forth. There are some modes where there isn't compatibility. So if you were using these new receivers on the Nomad or the GX12, everything in the center line is compatible, whereas if you were using these receivers with, say, your original modules based on either the SX1280 or 1281 chipset or the SS127 times chipset, there are a few modes that aren't compatible. So for instance, these new receivers won't work on the low band on the 25 or D50 Hz mode, and these new receivers on the 2.4 gigs don't support the original FLRC modes, but they do support the new modes that have been added. Although, again, just to stress, you only get Gemini X capability with the dual chipset receivers that fully support both bands. Now, it is worth mentioning on that you should always check the XpressLRS website for the latest options and modes and compatibility. What I've shown you here is correct at the time of me publishing, and in fact, it may have even already changed. There is constant development in XpressLRS, so with regards to modes, do check out the XpressLRS website and their wiki for the latest info. Now, the final thing to talk about is price. Now, as I've said already, these receivers are going to be available in a number of different versions apart from the XR2. If we start with the XR1, as I've said, it'll be available in a dual band version, 2.4 gigs or sub-gig 900. Now, the dual band version is available for just $11.99. The 2.4 gigs version is going to come in at the same price, or the sub 900 megs is again the same price. You're going to get a little bit better performance from the antennas on the dedicated bands compared to the dual band, because there is always a payoff on a dual band antenna, but overall it is great value that they're all available at the $11.99 price point. Looking back, we can then move over to the XR2. Again, as I've mentioned already, this one is limited to 2.4 gigs only. Only one option available for this one, $9.99. A great price for a high quality XpressLRS receiver. Next, moving over to the XR3. This again is that dual band capable, but this is the version with the antenna diversity. So we have, again, dual band antennas, but it comes with two of them, available for $14.99, or you can get it in the dual 2.4 gigs or the dual 900. Then finally, moving over to the XR4. This is the big boy, the Gemini X capable. This one is only available in the dual band option, and you can see here that it is available for $19.99. Whilst you can't get this one with the antennas, you can get the antennas separately. Radiomaster are selling the dual 2.4 gig separately, available for $3.49, and you can get them in different lengths as well. And they will also have the dual 900s available too. This is a phenomenally priced set of XpressLRS receivers and will be ideal for pretty much 99% of people out there today. That is it from me on this one. It's not really a review, it's just to show you what is out there. It is great to see these new receivers available. If you're interested in taking a look at them and finding out more, such as pricing and things like that, there will be links to them in the description. Those links are affiliate links to Radiomaster, but you can go to radiomaster.com and find out more info from there as well if you want to. But if you want to support the channel, there is an affiliate link there. Radiomaster is one of very few brands that I use affiliate links with, but I do it because they are a brand that we trust. You don't have to use them, just go straight to their website and have a look. It really isn't an issue. Hopefully, if you want to find out more, they'll have everything listed now the launch is out there. I do know the XR3 is going to come a little bit later than the ones I've shown you here today, hence the reason why I didn't have it. But as I've said already, it is great to see that stack of receivers expand out. The LR1121 chipset really is expanding out now, and it's great to have this very simple, very straightforward dual band capability receivers. You can just set your radio to 2.4 gigs and use that, or you can set it to 900 and get the best of whatever you want. Now, before I finish this one up, I just want to say, please also consider checking out the link to the XpressLRS Dev Team Open Collective page. None of this would be possible without the amazing work of the XpressLRS dev team, and whilst there are many brands such as Radiomaster out there that support them, please also consider donating and supporting the XpressLRS project. We would not have all of this without their amazing work, so again, there will be a link to that in the description. Please do consider checking it out. Now, that's it from me on this one. If you have any questions that I haven't answered, please do put them down below and I will try and answer them. If there's anything you want to know, put it down below. And finally, I just want to say, if you'd like to support the channel to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buying me a coffee. It is only through the support of my patrons we're able to keep making content on this channel. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep doing it in the future, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a huge thank you. And I say this on every video, but I genuinely mean it. A massive thank you to all of my Patreons. We would not be able to do this without your support. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.